There aren't many ready-to-run locomotives that get announced and then kind of go under the radar until finally the model appears on the shelves and suddenly social media starts to explode in an outpouring of love and interest for what is a very diminutive and would have been back in the day a run-of-the-mill locomotive. But Rapido's all-new tooled Y7 is one which looks like it might be doing just that. A big hello to you, it's so great to see you and I do hope I find you well. I'm Jennifer Kirk, welcoming you up here to Weir Yard, where today we're going to be taking a look at Rapido's latest locomotive release, the Y7, or if you prefer, the H-Class from the North Eastern Railway as it was originally designated, and we're going to see whether all of this excitement that suddenly exploded on social media is warranted and justified over this model. There's quite a few different versions that Rapido have tooled up for, with some quite subtle differences between them. And this was a locomotive that 35 years after the very first one rolled out of the workshops and was steamed for the first time, the London and North Eastern Railway actually built some more to exactly the same design. Such was their suitability for the task at hand. And can you imagine that now? Somebody building a locomotive or a lorry or an aeroplane or a car, in fact any kind of machinery, to exactly the same design that had been there 35 years before and not changed a single thing. I think it would have been almost unprecedented, and yet that's exactly what happened with the Y7 shunter. During their lifetime, they really did travel far and wide. Ostensibly built for the docks in the North Eastern Railway system, they did later on get all the way to Shrewsbury, down to Woolwich Dockyard, and indeed all the way up into Scotland too, and they really were a useful engine. A number were sold on into industry, and indeed one of the surviving examples of the two that have passed into preservation made its way there via a long turn with the NCB. Two of these locomotives lasted through into British Railways ownership, and one of those also made it to preservation. But today, thanks to Rapido Trains, who very kindly sent over an example for us to take a good close look at, we're going to see what all the fuss is about. Is this really the small shunter that you can't ignore? And is it one that's going to prove wildly popular? There's certainly some very eye-catching liveries, and between LNER Black, North Eastern Railway Green, BR Black, and indeed a very, very eye-catching North Eastern Railway Blue version that's been produced as a special commission for Rails of Sheffield, there's certainly plenty to pick from, and I think some of these liveries are going to prove very popular indeed. Come with me and let's take a good close look. But before we do that, don't forget to tickle the like button and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, to be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. And of course, all of the models featured today, we've got an affiliate link down below to help you find those if you really like the look of what you're seeing. But come with me and let's take a closer look. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabriek.co.uk. Additional support comes from...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model 00 gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com and don't miss out on your latest loco.
It does feel like every other week we've got a new release from Rapido Trains, and this week is no exception. It's finally here, the LNER Y7 locomotive, or the North Eastern Railway H-Class if you prefer, and these were an incredibly useful locomotive. Designed by Wurzel in the 19th century. There was a number of different batches of these made, and they proved to be incredibly useful for tightly curved and somewhat unevenly laid dock work, track work. They were a very powerful locomotive, having what was actually quite a large boiler for the size of the locomotive, and that meant that they could generate a lot of steam and pull some pretty respectable loads over that questionable track work. Rapido announced these and announced quite a few different livery options, and some of them look incredibly colourful. And it has finally got here. They're very, very kindly sent over this particular example, 932007. And this is the LNER Black version of the locomotive as number 1302. And this is the DCC Ready version, and we are going to be doing a full DCC fit of this model later on in the video. So if you want to get some pointers on that, then do stay tuned. It'll be probably in the final third of the video. It comes in a standard looking Rapido trains box, but this is actually quite small. It's still pretty substantial, and it does protect the model very, very well. And this is definitely one of the selling points that Rapido make of the model. And when you actually open up, look at all of this high density foam that's been added in to protect the model in transit. So you could imagine that your courier of choice can try and drop kick this all they like, and actually that locomotive is very likely to survive completely unscathed. We've also got some additional detail equipment here, so these can be added to the model if you so choose. There is actually some really good information on those as well. So we get the fairly standard Rapido booklet, which goes with this, and it gives us a potted history of the class. 10 locomotives ordered in 1891, another 3 in 1897. All 19 passed into LNER ownership, classified by the LNER as Y7, and they found them so useful. A further 5 were built in 1923, actually 35 years after the original engines were built. They were reasonably long-lasting. 2 of these locomotives lasted into BR ownership, and they were quite widely used up and down the country. Initially concentrated in the northeast, places such as Darlington, Gateshead Works, Alexandra Docks, Tyne Docks. They spread themselves around St Margaret's Shed, Leith Docks, Tweedmouth, York. I think they worked at Hull Docks as well at some point, and also got as far as Stratford and Neasden. And during the war, some were loaned to the Ministry of Works at Schroewardine near Shrewsbury. I'm probably massacring that pronunciation. The Admiralty at Kyle of Lacalche as well had one. The 3 went to the Royal Arsenal at Woolwich. And even though the Great Depression did kind of decimate the class numbers with withdrawals, a further 9 were actually sold into industry, and it's one of these that was sold into industry that actually survived as one of the 2 preserved examples. We've got some information here as well about those extra pieces, what they all are, gives you a good clue where they go. Not all Y7s had all of these parts, which is probably one of the reasons why these are in the detail pack. Got some information on couplings and also on DCC fitting. Now, as I said before, we're going to be doing a full DCC fit, if you have the factory sound option, we've also got in here the DCC functions list. Although one of the things that I will warn you, even though it lists Firebox Glow on F0, it does appear that certainly the DCC Ready versions do not appear to have Firebox Glow. Now, I can't speak for the factory fitted ones. I have actually asked Rapido, I haven't had a response yet on the issue of Firebox Glow, but just be aware that certainly this model doesn't have the Firebox glow and doesn't appear to have any means for it to be fitted. So let's get rid of some of this high impact foam, which incidentally, if you're worried about environmental stuff, don't worry, this stuff is amazing for doing modelling with, so do save that. It will disappear into your landscape and be most welcome as it does that. Getting the model out here, it really is quite tiny. You can see it there in the palm of my hand. And I'm just going to look around actually. Let's see what other locomotive I can find to compare it to. I've got Rapido's 16-inch Hunslet, and I guess a good comparison might be the J70 model. So you can see there that it's slightly smaller than the J70 and definitely a lot smaller than the Hunslet. And in terms of weight, that is actually really quite good compared to a lot what you would expect from a model this kind of size, especially as it comes really quite well spec'd. There's a brass flywheel inside here, which I will show you when I open it up for the DCC fitting. It's got a coreless motor, and there's also a factory fitted speaker on all versions of the model, so even if you don't spec out for factory sound, you can add a sound decoder in there at a later date, and all you need to do is source the sound decoder. You don't need to bother with trying to get a speaker fitted in. It also means that if you wanted to add a stay alive on an ordinary DCC fitted model, then it might be worth considering that if you remove the speaker, that does give you quite a good amount of space to be able to put a stay alive in without actually needing to do too much in the way of jiggery pokery of various bits and pieces. Now, I'm going to measure the weight. I've got spring balance here, so this is a fairly basic spring balance, and I'm actually going to hook the model by its coupling. You probably don't want to do this too much. So let's just see now. That's coming down to 95, 96 grams, which is pretty good actually. It's nearly off the bottom of my spring balance here, about 96. I'm going to say 96 grams with my rather crude spring balance. Now, when we take a good close look at the model, it does capture the essence of the Y7 really quite well. These had a domeless boiler, and you can see there a big, long, flat boiler barrel, no dome, and this was a particular feature of this locomotive. It actually shared the boiler, firebox and smokebox with a couple of other classes of locomotives, the J78 and the J79s, which certainly the front end back to about there was pretty much identical between the three classes. The only difference being that they had an extra axle back here. The J79s, I believe, were the crane tanks, and the J78s were the regular tank versions. So I am secretly hoping, and I have no information on this, that perhaps Rapido trains might be considering the J78s and J79s, but that's probably me wish listing rather than anything else. We've got the characteristic single spoke wheels here, and these are captured really well. We've got the curve on the spokes really nicely done. The black finish, incidentally, is really, really well done. We've got this kind of satiny black finish, which really does work well. It's either looks perfectly respectable as a completely clean locomotive, or as a really good basis for weathering. The real locomotives would have always looked a little bit oily, a little bit grimy, even when fresh from the cleaning process in the sheds. So definitely a little bit of a dusting over this would go a long way. You can see through the spokes we've got the representation of the springs there. That's really nicely done, and all of this brake rigging is factory fitted. There's nothing here for the user to need to put together. We've also got the sandpipes. These, I'm not sure whether they're metal or plastic, but certainly very robust. A lot of spring to them, which is good. And we've got coupling rods here. These are metal, and they're kind of got this gunmetal finish with the hexagonal nuts. Now, I'm not quite sure whether that is meant to be, it just looks on my camera screen a little bit bowed, not really sure. Yeah, looking at that side, that looks straight. I think I'm going to put that down to just being a little quirk of the this particular example. I'm guessing, there's always going to be a few knocks in assembly. But I have already tested this and it runs absolutely fine, so it's not really causing any issues. We've got that representation of the motion inside. That is completely stationary, but it's nice to see that actually in there. It's not a low relief kind of detail. It's actual separate parts. You can see it again just through the bottom, those red representations of the motion, and they're quite visible through this elliptical cutout in the chassis, and I do like the way that they've done that. We've got the sandboxes here at the back. There are some other bits and pieces of detail. There's some pipe work actually hiding underneath the tanks, and we've got the sandboxes again at the front. The guard irons, these feel like they're metal. They're very, very robust, and they do capture the look that matches up with some of the photographs I've seen of the Y7s, and certainly with two preserved examples, then Rapido have had a lot of opportunity to be able to scan the real deal. The cab steps are very robust. They feel like they're metal and certainly well attached. That's always been a gripe of mine with some locomotives, that the steps just don't seem to adhere very well to the rest of the model and are quite easily broken off. Don't get any of that problems here with this. We've got this kind of slab-sided tanks with the lettering on here, really is quite nice. Certainly with the LNER Black livery, that is the main focal point, and you can see there the drop shadowing with the red, the white, and that kind of yellowy, not quite gold, but getting there. It really does make up quite an impressive 3D rendition of the lettering, and it's certainly an area that when you look at these pre-grouping and also Big Four era liveries, they really did put a lot of effort into things. Looking around to the front, we've got more detail in there. You can see that motion again just down between the frames. There's a lot of air gap in there, which really makes it even more amazing just how much Rapido have been able to squeeze into this model without compromising areas such as that. I do like some of these fittings. You can see the difference in colour with the brass and the copper. The actual fitting is brass, the pipe is copper, and that is subtle but nicely done. Again, we've got the lubricator there for the pistons and the valve gear. That's nicely finished in the brass. We've got all metal handrails, and looking to the top, they're fairly Spartan tank tops. We've got the fillers at the front, again, really nicely dished on top. A lot of very fine detail. You can also see here on the top of this side of the tanks, we've got the coal area. Now, these locomotives outwardly don't appear to have anywhere to put the coal, but they did have this one little area that could take 6 1/4 hundredweight, which is just over 1/4 of a ton. It's not a huge amount, but certainly it was more than nothing. And quite often these locomotives would be seen with coal piled up in the cab, and it wasn't unheard of for them to also pile coal up on the roof of the cab as well, although I'm not quite sure how easy that would have been to access during the day. And then we've got the safety valve bonnet here at the back, and you can see there does seem to be a little bit of a line in the middle as I rotate that. Not quite clear whether that's supposed to be there or whether that's an artifact from the moulding, but it's a very complicated shape and it does seem to have been captured very, very well. We've got the actual bar on the top. You can just see the tops of what would be springs in there, which would be set to the blow-off pressure. Really, really nice. And I do like the cab windows, the front circular windows with the brass surround, and that glazing is absolutely flush. And if you look in the back as well, They're flush glazed to the back too. There's no glazing bar, there's none of that nonsense, and you can see we've got a pressure gauge and it's showing the actual boiler pressure on there. I can see the needle, and that pipe is exquisite. This sort of attention to detail, you see how the pipe comes up, round, over the top, down, and then up to the bottom of the pressure gauge there. Really, really nice. And there's a lot of separately fitted detail on this back head. I really do like the chevroned water gauges on there. It's such a nice touch. We've got more brass control wheels, and then we've got this brake standard at the back, and you can see the riveting to match with how that would be on the real thing. We've got, I think these are hangers for some of the tools that you get in the extra detail pack. These are metal and very robust. And then we've got separately fitted metal lamp irons as well. There's a maker's plate on the back there. It looks to say LNER and a number. I don't know whether the LNER replaced the original Northeastern Railway plates or not, or whether this is one of the 5 that were built by the LNER, but that does look quite nice and crisp. And then we've got the number 1302, again with that drop shadowing on the red finished buffer beam. And again, that choice of red is really nice. It's like a kind of satin verging on matte red, and it really does capture the look well. Buffers are sprung. We've got turned metal heads by the feel of it. And I do like these shanks here with the 4 rivet effect, just like the real ones would be. Couplings are in NEM pockets. We've got the triangular tail in there, so it is possible to swap these out if needs be. We don't have the clip-in ones with the kind of fish tails, but you can see that space very much is of a premium, so it is still possible to change these out for KDs should you so wish. We've also got the metal draw hook, and as you could see in the detail pack, they've got coupling chains that you can add in, which do look to be fully functional. Looking again from the side into the cab, we've got again the brass fittings with the copper pipework, really quite nicely put together, and this very characteristic cab shape with the roof that overhangs at the back. I'm guessing this would have added protection to the crew, especially when doing coupling up, so you could lean out and look down and accurately gauge the distance to avoid rough shunting the wagons. The cab roof itself has the correct ribbing, and then we've got a turned metal whistle on there. Again, really nice and robust. Looking back across, I like that the smoke box, it's very subtle, but you see it's got almost like that stove blacking as opposed to the gloss black. It's a different shade of black, and when you see it against the light like this, it really does work well. The funnel on top, we do have what appears to be a moulding line there. A little bit of a shame, but it's one of those necessities of the manufacturing process, and really, unless you go looking for it, it's not really all that noticeable. I do like the shape on this. We've got the flared out top and the lip around there, and then again, looking down, we've got a nice deep hole. It doesn't look like it's just moulded on. There's an actual substance to it, which really is nice to see. The front face of the locomotive is captured really, really well. You can see there this rather distinctive smoke box with the dished smoke box door, and also the smoke box dart with kind of a wheel in the centre is done really well. We've got more of these metal lamp iron brackets, one on the top here as well, and a metal handrail, the arc of which follows the smoke box door perfectly. Again, from the side, you can see that dished look, and that dart is, it feels like it's, I'm not sure actually, no, that might be plastic, but it's that bit springy, but that bit feels like it could almost be metal. It's quite hard to tell. On the front again, we've got a repeat of the same design of buffer beam. We've got the number 1302 on there with that drop shadowing, and then class Y7 picked out underneath. It's all nice and crisp, and really for what is, I suppose, a simple locomotive, it does look like Rapido have gone above and beyond. Today's video is sponsored by TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for finding all of the models featured today at the best possible price at the link in the description. TMC also offers custom weathering and renumbering to any model, be it brand new or pre-owned. Check out their full pre-owned listings too, where you can be assured of quality as every item is screened and graded by professional staff. TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for all aspects of modelling. With the model on DC, it is super smooth. I had it on the rolling road and out of the box, and notwithstanding the fact that Rapido does recommend that you run it in both directions for best performance, I actually found that this model was superb. Even down to a very low speed, it was crisp and clean. There was no juddering. The pickup from the four wheels does seem perfectly good, and I had no issues whatsoever, even down to an absolute crawl. There was very little sign of cogging, and it seemed to be a very reliable performer. I could verify though that there is certainly no Firebox flicker on display. And as I delve into this model, we'll see whether there is any mechanism in here. Maybe it only works on DCC. So we now come to the DCC Fitting, and the tools you're going to need for this. First up, a very small jeweler's style crosshead screwdriver. Make sure that this is a good solid fit into the heads of the screws and isn't going to round them off and destroy them. You also might find it useful to have a flathead screwdriver just for being able to lever a couple of bits out of the way. And today I'm going to be fitting a Zen Blue Plus decoder, which if you want to add a stay alive to, features a just plug-in fly lead. If you don't need that, you can cut this off, and I tend to use something like nail varnish just to make sure that the ends of those wires can't actually short out on anything. But if you do want to fit a stay alive and you're not using sound in the locomotive, it's something that you can possibly remove the speaker and its enclosure to free up the space needed for that. First things first, underneath the model, and this is as per the instructions, it highlights these four screws on the running plate. So we'll undo those first, and then the instructions just say to gently work the body off. And what you'll find at this stage is it comes off at the back, but it feels very firmly attached at the front. So this is the missing step from the instructions that it doesn't tell you. Down here, there's a fifth screw. And what you need to do is gently unscrew that. And as you can see, that allows the front coupling to come away. You will then notice there's actually a clip down here. Using the flathead screwdriver, push that back, push that down, and that's the step that's missing from the instructions to allow you access inside your model. You're welcome. If you really found that helpful, then do please hit the like button. Inside the model, you can see here we've got this lovely tiny coreless motor which really fits neatly inside the boiler barrel. We've also got a brass flywheel, and then that transmits through a cardan shaft to this gear tower which is hidden inside the firebox. We've got a speaker enclosure with the speaker already in there. If you wanted to fit a stay alive, this is probably the space that you can make full use of. We're going to just gently lift out this circuit board, and then we can remove the blanking plate. It just lifts up. Remember, it's still attached by wires, so be a little bit gentle. So just going to very, very carefully remove the blanking plate. Put that to one side, and then we've got our Zen Blue Plus decoder, and these are incidentally available from the link that we've got down below that takes you to TMC, the Model Centre. Make sure it's lined up and get a nice positive click. Once we're happy with that, just make sure that none of these wires are going to get caught, and then this just slides carefully back into place. It is a tight fit, but there are some foam pads which give you a little bit of give. If you're really struggling with your decoder, then you can carefully just remove some of that foam pad. And then the extra fly lead, you can either find somewhere to tuck this out of the way, or if you're not going to use it, then you can just cut it off. And like I said before, I tend to use something like nail varnish just to protect the ends. It's like a liquid insulator. I'm going to use some Captain tape just to secure that, and then the actual plug will just tuck into place back here. And then it's simply a case of reversing the process, gently making sure all lines up, just making sure that all this cable is kept away from that screw hole. Otherwise, when you screw the body back on, it will chew through the cables and you'll get some slightly bizarre faults develop. And then we're looking to add back in all of these screws and just gently re-secure the body. And then, of course, not forgetting the coupling that we took out to access the secret screw. And then when we're happy that it's all back together, we've got a nice flush sit along the bunker sides, then it's time to get this onto the programming track. You can program it up and then test it on the main layout. On track at Weir Yard, one of the first things that I did was change CV66 with the Zen Blue Plus and Zen Black decoders. This is a CV setting that takes care of all of the back EMF stuff to cater for a coreless motor. Now, you can set all this yourself, but it does involve tweaking quite a few different CVs, and the CV66 function takes care of all of this. Just change it to 1 for coreless or leave it at 0 for an iron core motor. On the twists and turns and point work of Weir Yard on the main track, it actually performed really well. There are some slight gradients, and it really took these in its stride with what is a significant length train for this size of locomotive. When it came to the torture test track, which does include some 5% grades and some really quite unfavourable point work, it still performed reasonably well. Unlike locomotives that are bigger than it and heavier than it still remained reasonably sure-footed with a short train and got all the way round with no real great issues. What I did find, though, was that with no stay alive in it, it does have a propensity to find all of the dirty spots on your track if you try and run it at a crawl. It also tends to be a little bit hit and miss on the insel frog points at these low speeds, but if you give it a little bit more in the way of beans, then it does seem to get across these without too many difficulties. And I do think that adding in the just plug-in stay alives, utilising the space that the speaker and enclosure take up, will turn this into an absolutely amazing runner. All in all, I was really actually quite impressed with what this diminutive Y7 could achieve, and certainly it packed a bigger punch than a number of other similar-sized locomotives in my fleet. During the review, I fell in love with this diminutive Y7, so much so that I actually went and ordered myself this particular model. This is the as-preserved Northeastern Railway Green. It really is a pretty model. And what it's brought home to me is that there are some quite subtle detail differences between the different livery versions. The most obvious on these is the cab roof, and you can see here that Rapido has tooled up at least 2 different cab roof styles to be able to accurately represent the different versions of the class. We've also appeared to have different safety valves as well. The actual bonnet appears to be the same, but on the Northeastern Railway one, we don't have the extra bar at the top. And it does strike me that there's some quite subtle differences between the different versions. And it's really nice to see that Rapido have tooled up for all of these. We also have the vacuum brake standards that a number of the members of this class were fitted with. Not all were, and you can see LNER 1302 is without, whilst North Eastern Railway 1310, which represents one of the preserved examples, does have that vacuum standard. And this would also be a fitting that some members carried even during North Eastern Railway and later LNER days. In fact, some of the Y7s even worked passenger trains on a particular branch line up until the early 1950s, so a vacuum brake standard is definitely a valuable addition. So we turn now to the scores. First up is build quality, and this locomotive was reasonably well put together. There's a lot of good thought gone into the materials used that makes it really quite strong and robust. And the only area where I had any real difficulty were some of the pipes at the front of the tanks, which did seem to be a little bit loose, and indeed I had to glue one of them back on after investigating the means to DCC fit this model. There's also one of the side rods which does appear to have a slight bow to it, but I'm going to put this down to being one of those random things, and it actually does not hurt the performance of this locomotive in the slightest. So I'm going to give this a 9.1. On running quality, the locomotive does punch well above its weight, handling quite a long train on the main track, taking in the grades, the twists, the turns, and all of the complex point work, including double slips and scissor crossings, without any great issue. When you run it at a crawl, though, it does tend to judder in a few places, and I put this down to the very short wheelbase and only having 4 wheels to pick up from, and it's certainly a candidate that would be much improved for the fitting of a stay alive, which I believe that there is room if you are prepared to remove the factory fitted speaker and enclosure. On the torture test track, it still put in a pretty good performance and actually outperformed an awful lot of other locomotives that I have in my fleet. So I'm going to give this an 8.9. When it comes to DCC fitting and innovation, the model was slightly handicapped by the fact that Rapido have accidentally shipped the wrong version of the instructions with it, and this omits some of the details, such as that hidden clip at the front that you need to undo an extra screw to remove the coupling and gain access to. But once you know about this, getting into the model wasn't too difficult, and it's a really thoughtful layout inside, which does make DCC fitting fairly straightforward. With the factory fitted speaker and enclosure, it means that a sound installation is an absolute doddle, and actually there does seem to be a reasonable amount of space for even a slightly larger Next 18 decoder. Again, there seems to be a discrepancy in the manual with regard to mentioning of a Firebox flicker, and again this is something that Rapido have put down to the wrong version of the instructions having been shipped with the model. A correct version of the instructions are available electronically, and they have communicated this out to all the dealers stocking these locomotives. Everything else about it really is exquisite in terms of the detail, the choice of materials, and I particularly like that open frame chassis with all of the motion visible within, and the open-backed cab, which really does allow you to enjoy all of that backhead detail, and I'm going to give this an 8.6. On accuracy and quality of finish, there really just isn't anything to fault. Everything about this model does seem to be pretty much perfect. Comparing it with photographs, I'm really hard-pressed to actually point out anything that to my eyes was radically wrong on this locomotive. Rapido have definitely taken a lot of time, care and effort over this model, and with nothing much of note to fault, I'm going to give it the full 10 out of 10. On value for money, The model has an RRP of £245 for the factory sound version and £145 for the DCC Ready version. However, these can be found for up to 15% off this price at a number of different stockists, and we do have a link down below which is an affiliate link to TMC where all of the models in the range can be found for that 15% off RRP. Also of note is the fact that Rails of Sheffield do have a special commission in a really quite eye-catching blue livery, so if that's a must-have item then you should go and check out the Rails of Sheffield listing for this exclusive version. All in all, this model does definitely punch well above its weight. There are a few little issues, but nothing that's insurmountable, and really there's always going to be some engineering compromises to make a model this small and still able to perform, and it does look like Rapido have made some excellent choices to bring this diminutive model to ready-to-run form, and it gets a 45.6 from me. Well, I hope you really enjoyed today's video and found it informative, and certainly from my point of view, the more I saw of the Y7, the more I really liked about it. It did seem to be a really quite clever engineering design. Despite the fact being one of the smallest ready-to-run models on the market, what Rapido have shown is you can still get quite a lot inside there without compromising the outside of the model. So we've still got that space through underneath where you can see the representation of the motion. But inside we've got a brass flywheel, we've got a motor hidden in the boiler, and more importantly perhaps, we've got that full DCC ready with space for anywhere up to actually quite a reasonably sized Next 18 decoder in one tank, and space in the other tank for a factory fitted speaker and enclosure. Now, in a locomotive this size, you're never going to get a massive mega bass speaker. You're never going to get one of those stay alives that you can take your locomotive and wave goodbye to it as it runs off across your railway room floor quite happily for 20 minutes. But what you can get into this is enough to make it an incredibly reliable performer with sound and such like without having to do any modification, and that is a really good sign of things to come. Its performance on wear yard was really quite satisfactory when you consider very short wheelbase 4-coupled wheel arrangement, and it did take in a lot of the point work without too much of an issue. Of course, if you're going to let it crawl along over insulfrog points, over twisted track work, that it's going to have a few little issues, but no more so than anything else. And in fact, I found that when you compared it to a lot of the other really short wheelbase locomotives, the 4-coupled ones, it outperformed every single one of them. Again, you're not going to be able to pull a 12-coach train with one of these, and the prototypes would never have been tasked with the same either. But it did pull a respectable length train, and it did it across some of the gradients here on wear yard really quite well. Don't forget that we've got an affiliate link down below to help you find all the different liveries that this model is available in. And I think they're going to prove quite popular. Some of the pretty liveries are going to sell out very quickly. Indeed, talking with Rails of Sheffield, they've said that their special commission is actually mostly sold out already. So you're going to need to get your skates on for some of these liveries, because if you miss it, you're going to miss out. And don't forget to tickle the like button and consider sharing this video, and also subscribing to the channel if you've not already done so. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments section down below. Just what do you think about this model? Have you already got one? Have you got one on order? Or have you been watching this video and thought, I like that, I really want one? Then do let me know in the comments section, and it's always good to hear from anybody who's got information that maybe you think I've missed. Share that with your fellow modeler. It's a good way of helping out the community. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying don't forget to check us out over on Patreon, check out the full merch store, and until next time, you take great care of yourself. Happy modelling. Bye for now. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabriek.co.uk. Additional support is provided by
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model double O gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com and don't miss out on your latest loco.
Today's video is sponsored by TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for finding all of the models featured today at the best possible price at the link in the description. TMC also offers custom weathering and renumbering to any model, be it brand new or pre-owned. Check out their full pre-owned listings too, where you can be assured of quality as every item is screened and graded by professional staff. TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for all aspects of modelling. I'd like to thank everybody over on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to our Patreon heroes. Without you guys over on Patreon, we really wouldn't be able to keep making the video content that you see on this channel. And don't forget that you can also head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk and check out the different tiers of rewards. Thank you so much. You are absolute legends.